We're back here on Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Chris Carter, Kevin Ostreicher, Locked On Steelers, Locked On Ravens. Kevin, one of the bigger notes I think this week is Kyle Hamilton's injury. He was questionable at the start of the week. What is an update on what's going on with him?
Yeah, so on Wednesday, Hamilton did not practice. He was off on a side field working with the trainer in workout clothes. So he was out there, but not actually out there. The injury looked really bad when it first happened. And, on replay, it seemed like his foot got caught just barely under Mike Gesicki. I believe it was his foot. They kind of got tangled and the ankle twisted in pretty badly. But the great news coming out of the game was it wasn't considered a serious injury. He has a shot to play. I'd probably call it 50-50 right now. I think that Friday's injury report will probably be the biggest one in terms of determining the game, as it usually is, right? But I think that, the Ravens secondary, you talk about how poor they've been this season. Well, that comes with Kyle Hamilton being on the field for them. So obviously when he's not out there, that ceiling and the floor just plummets even further, and it'd be a big loss because he can do so much for them. Obviously, they love to use him all over the place. He's their Swiss Army knife, and as a blitzer, middle of the field, up at the line, deep half. I mean, they do everything with him. And the drop-off between him and their next guy, which they're playing Darius Washington there right now, but it's a steep one. So Hamilton didn't practice on Wednesday, but a couple more days for him to get back on the field. And if he suits up, he'll probably be some level of limited, maybe a little, maybe a lot, but we'll see, because he's a tough guy, and he's come out and played with injuries that people thought he'd be out for a month or two, and he's come back in like a week. So he's a tough guy.
He is a tough guy. I've seen him play. He's a tough player too. I think he's a really good player, and if he's in this game, it changes everything for the Ravens secondary because of what he brings to the table. Like you said, he's very versatile. He's athletic. It's funny, he ran a 4.8 time in the 40-yard dash, and I was like, nah, still pick him in the first round. And the Ravens were smart to do so, because I was sitting there wondering, like, ooh, how far does he fall? How far does he fall? And of course, Baltimore snatched him up. And I was like, well, there you go. So the Steelers are dealing with some injuries, not nearly as serious though. Now, Alex Highsmith is out. That is pretty serious. He's a pretty good edge rusher for the Steelers, but good news on a few fronts. Nick Herbig back into full practice on Wednesday. That means he's probably ready to go this week. Dante Jackson didn't practice with a hamstring injury, but Mark Caboli of the Pat McAfee show reported that he got an MRI and that he'll be cleared and that he's expected to play. Najee Harris didn't practice with an ankle injury, but Najee don't practice half the time because they know that he can just come in and play. I'm pretty sure he's going to play. Van Jefferson had a quad. Mike Tomlin did not mention him among the injured players going into this week, so I assume that that's also just a rest thing. So the Steelers, I think, largely healthy outside of Alex Highsmith in this one. Are there any other Ravens players, Kevin, that play into this that we should be watching out for the rest of the week?
Isaiah Likely would probably be the one. He missed last week with a hamstring injury. He was back at practice on Wednesday, so that's something to monitor. Calvin Noy missed practice on Wednesday, one of their big edge rushers, but that was due to an illness, so we'll see kind of as that progresses along the week. But other than that, Baltimore is pretty healthy right now, which is honestly quite a weird thing for me to say at this time in the year, considering the Ravens have really had pretty rotten injury luck over the last 5 seasons at this point in the year. Usually they got mini CVS receipts as their injury reports, but it's actually only 5 or 6 players right now. So they haven't really had to deal with a lot. It's been guys who've had to miss a game or two, like Marlon Humphrey, for example, is one of those names, but they just got Keaton Mitchell back off of injured reserve. I expect him to play a bigger role than he did against Cincinnati last week. That was kind of just his, welcome back game. Now I think he'll have more of a role carved out for him. Brent Urban returned to practice. He's dealt with a concussion the past couple of weeks. One of their D linemen, he was full. So I assume if everything's good there, he'll be good to go. The only guy they're really missing right now is Michael Pierce, who's on injured reserve, who's one of their big guys in the middle, who is a nightmare to block for opposing offensive linemen, but he's obviously not going to play. He's the guy that they miss. But Travis Jones has been dealing with an ankle injury over the last couple of weeks, but returned against Cincinnati. Well, he actually didn't miss a game. He didn't play in some of the games. It was very limited, but he looked back to himself, and he's one of the interior pass rushers that maybe not a lot of people know about right now, but you watch him play, and he's just an absolute game wrecker out there.
Agreed there. I think that this is you got to watch the injuries going into this week, but regardless of who is available, to me, this feels a little old school right now in that Both the Steelers and the Ravens are atop the division, duking it out, and this is the first of 2 games. It just brings me back to like the heyday of when it was Hines Ward, it was Ray Lewis, it was Ed Reed, it was Troy Polamalu, and just you knew when the first time they met, there was going to be a second time, and both were going to be a lot of fun to watch. And it's the premier 1:00 game in a crazy slate of a weekend with all the games that are going to be going on. I'm really interested to see how this plays out. I also am interested to see how Russell Wilson and Lamar Jackson contrast in their styles. Lamar Jackson is the engine that makes the Ravens go. I would say that Russell Wilson's become the point guard that allows the Steelers offense to make plays. And so it's kind of funny. You got a guy who's more of a facilitator, who kind of has all the assists, a John Stockton, if you will, in Russell Wilson. Meanwhile, you got like Steph Curry and Lamar Jackson. He's just jacking up the threes all over the place. And I'm really intrigued by who's going to find more success with their style of play going into this game.
Yeah, and Lamar literally, Steph Curry was, chucking up on was touchdown in week 10. Rashad Bateman did the follow through, the 3-point celly. He bought into that whole thing. So look, I think this is going to be one of those classic AFC North games. Maybe it's going to be, I think, more of an offensive game than maybe we're used to between Baltimore and Pittsburgh, just because Baltimore's pass defense has been so poor. And I think Baltimore's offense can exploit some of the things that Pittsburgh does very well. I think this is a really tough test for both sides. But I think that for the Ravens, if they can get off to a fast start, if they can establish the run against that Pittsburgh defense, and then obviously if they can get their pass offense going with everybody getting involved, I think that would be a nice path to victory on the Baltimore side of things. And, just a quick note, because we started with Patrick Queen and I had to end it with him too. He caused waves in Baltimore. Most controversial take of the offseason, talking about that Pittsburgh versus Baltimore food, and got the pierogies versus the crab cakes going on. We couldn't stand for it here. We could not stand for it in Baltimore. Look, I'm fine with pierogies. I like pierogies. But for me, the argument, and what is it? Permane Brothers is the big one in Pittsburgh with the sandwiches.
Look. I tell people all the time, Permane's is the tourism food. You come to Pittsburgh, I hook you up with all the real food. That's like going to Philly and say, I'm going to go to Geno's and Pat. Those are the tourism cheesesteak spots. You got to go to Joe's in West Philly to really experience a real Philly cheesesteak.
Okay, then what's the Pittsburgh real food then? Like, what do you go to Pittsburgh to get?
First of all, Pittsburgh's got insane pizza minios, where I think we have the most pizza bars per capita in the United States. We got amazing wings with Will Penn. We got amazing everything. And Permane's, look, they're a staple. Fries on a sandwich. That's the thing there. But like, I'll tell you, Pittsburgh, we have Polish Hill. We are a city of immigrants. We have all different styles pouring into Pittsburgh as for a much deeper, rich experience. A lot of Italian food here as well here. So that's the thing. Pittsburgh is just much more diverse than I think people give it credit for. They just stick to the fries on a sandwich thing because that's just the thing that you always see on TV.
Man, Baltimore, look, for my thing was with the crab cakes. It's always like, okay, you get, like, have you had a Maryland crab cake before? Like,
I love the crab cakes. Yeah.
Right. So it's like when you talk about crab cakes, it's like, okay, let's go get a Maryland crab cake, right? Do you say, let's go get a Pittsburgh pierogi or a Pittsburgh Permane Brothers? Like,
we just say we going to Permane's. Yeah.
Man, the crab cake, because Patrick Queen was like, I like real food. And I'm just like, okay, is seafood not real food? Like, what constitutes real food? So everybody, because Patrick Queen was like, okay, fine, maybe you didn't like Baltimore, maybe you feel at home with Pittsburgh, but you bring the food into it now. Like, now you're bringing the city. Like, okay, now we have to have a talk about this. Now we have to really talk.
That's gonna be great. Listen. I've enjoyed my time in Baltimore. I've enjoyed my time in Maryland. In fact, I was just in Maryland, and I had some crab cakes, and I do I like Old Bay spice. Y'all throw that on everything over there. But listen, I dig it, but I understand Patrick Queen wanting to throw some jabs in there. It seems like that's what he does so well. But that's what I'm so excited for, Kevin. There's rivalry back, man. Both these teams are good at the same time. They're exciting at the same time. There's players that are talking smack to each other. And it's going to be a big showdown, 1 p.m. Acrisure Stadium.